The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as the emergency beacon flashed red across all screens. The council members, representing over 300 spacefaring species, turned their attention to the central holographic display. What they saw made even the most composed among them gasp. First Speaker Tom, a tall being with silvery skin, leaned forward in his hover chair. "Play the message," he commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. The hologram shifted, revealing a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a butterfly. Its translucent wings pulsed with soft blue light as it spoke. "This is High Elder Ray of the Lumini. Our world faces total destruction. Our scientists have detected an asteroid cluster on a direct collision course with our homeworld. We have less than 30 standard days before impact." The message continued, showing devastating projections. The asteroid cluster wasn't just one or two rocks. It was a swarm of over 50 large bodies, some as big as small moons, all hurtling toward the Lumini homeworld. The composition of the asteroids made them nearly impossible to detect until they were too close, their unusual mineral content having hidden them from standard scans. "We lack the technology to prevent this disaster," Ray continued, his wings dimming to a pale gray, a sign of deep distress among his kind. "Our world's gravity is too strong for our ships to carry sufficient explosive power into orbit. Our atmosphere, it would tear apart most vessels during repeated entries. We need help. Please, we are a peaceful people. We have never asked the Council for aid before." Second Speaker Bill, a reptilian being known for his analytical mind, pulled up the data on the Lumini homeworld. The numbers made several council members step back from their terminals. Surface gravity, 1.3 times standard. Atmosphere, dense with nitrogen compounds and sulfur. Temperature, averages 40 degrees standard. Bill's scales rippled with concern. Most species would find it impossible to mount a rescue mission. The environmental conditions alone would kill most of our rescue teams. The council erupted in worried discussion. The Lumini were indeed peaceful. They were known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. Their loss would be a tragic blow to galactic culture. But who could help them? Their world was, by most standards, a death trap. In the midst of the chaos, a quiet voice spoke up. It belonged to Observer Alice, one of the newer council members. She represented a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel in the last decade. "What about us?" she asked simply. The room fell silent again, but this time with a different energy. Every eye, sensor, and sensory appendage turned toward the human representative. "Your people?" First Speaker Tom asked, his silver skin rippling with surprise. "You would volunteer." Alice stood up, her simple action drawing attention because she didn't use anti-gravity assistance like most council members. "The conditions you described. They're harsh, yes, but not impossible for humans. The gravity is stronger than Earth's, but we can adapt. The atmosphere is toxic, but we have experience working in hazardous environments. The temperature," she smiled. "We have cities and places hotter than that." The council members began pulling up data on Earth, many seeing it for the first time. They saw a world of extremes, burning deserts and freezing poles, deep oceans and tall mountains, places where the air itself could kill, and regions of intense radiation. They saw images of humans working in space, deep underground, in volcanic regions, and under the crushing pressures of the ocean. "By your standards, we're Deathworlders," Alice continued, using the term some had whispered about humans. "We evolved on a world that challenged us at every step. Now those same challenges have given us the tools and resilience to help others." She walked to the central display and brought up images of human rescue operations on Earth, people rushing into burning buildings, diving into raging waters, descending into collapsed mines. "This is what we do. This is who we are. Let us help." The council chamber buzzed with discussion. First Speaker Tom raised his hand for silence, then spoke with formal gravity. The Council recognizes Earth's offer of assistance. Observer Alice, how quickly can your people respond? Alice's answer was immediate and firm. We already have ships designed for emergency operations in extreme environments. Just give us the coordinates. We'll handle the rest. As the Council moved to approve the mission, more than one member wondered if they had underestimated these newcomers to galactic society. Perhaps being a Deathworlder wasn't a disadvantage after all. Perhaps it was exactly what the galaxy needed right now. Captain James Miller stood at the bridge window of the Earth ship Endurance, watching his crew prepare for their most important mission yet. The ship's enhanced hull gleamed under the station lights as loading robots moved supplies into its cargo holds. Each crew member had been chosen for their experience in extreme environments. Deep-sea workers, high-altitude climbers, and space construction specialists. "Captain, the final mission briefing is ready," said John, his first officer. The man's weather-worn face showed both excitement and concern. Like many of the crew, he had spent years working in Earth's most dangerous places. Miller nodded and followed John to the briefing room. The ship's 20 core crew members were already seated, their faces illuminated by the holographic display showing the Lumini homeworld. "All right, people," Miller began, his deep voice carrying easily across the room. "Here's what we're facing. The Lumini world has gravity 1.3 times stronger than Earth's. The air is thick with nitrogen and sulfur. Breathe it without protection and your lungs will shut down in seconds. Surface temperature averages around 40 degrees Celsius. He paused as the hologram shifted to show the approaching asteroid cluster. These are our targets, 53 major bodies, plus hundreds of smaller ones. Traditional solutions won't work because of the planet's magnetic field. It's so strong it disrupts most energy weapons and long-range missiles." Mary, the chief engineer, raised her hand. "What about our suits? Standard spacesuits aren't designed for that kind of gravity." Miller smiled and pressed a button. A new image appeared, showing a bulky but flexible suit design. "Meet your new best friend, the Mark VI Heavy Environment Suit. It's based on deep-sea diving equipment, but reinforced for high gravity. The power assists will help you move, and the air system can handle the toxic atmosphere." The crew leaned forward, studying the suit's details. They had trained with prototypes, but this was the real thing. The suits were ugly, all function, no style. But they were humanity's best chance at completing this mission. "We've got something else," Miller continued. "The Lumini sent us data about their local plant life. Their biochemists worked with ours to create this." He held up a small blue pill. "It'll help our bodies process the higher gravity. We'll still feel it, but it won't crush us." Tom, the medical officer, took one of the pills and examined it. "Side effects: headaches, maybe some nausea at first. Better than having your spine compressed." Miller's joke got a few nervous laughs. "We start taking them tomorrow. Need to be adjusted before we arrive." The briefing continued with details about their modified shuttles, the drilling equipment they use on the asteroids, and the evacuation plans for the Lumini cities most at risk. Everything had been thought through, but everyone knew that plans rarely survived first contact with reality. As the meeting ended, Miller held up his hand. "One more thing. The Galactic Council's watching this mission closely. Most of them think we're crazy for trying. Some are betting we'll fail. But this isn't about them." He walked to the front of the room and looked each crew member in the eye. "This is about doing what humans do best, facing the impossible and finding a way through. The Lumini can't save themselves. No one else in the galaxy can help them. It's down to us." The room was silent for a moment. Then Bob, one of the oldest crew members, spoke up. "Those aliens think we're Deathworlders because we came from a tough planet. Well, Earth taught us something important. The harder the world, the stronger you have to be." Miller nodded. "Exactly. We leave in 6 hours. Get some rest, call your families, do whatever you need to do. When we launch, I need everyone ready." As the crew filed out, Miller stayed behind, studying the hologram of their destination. The Lumini homeworld hung there, beautiful and deadly, surrounded by the approaching asteroid swarm. Everything humanity had learned from surviving on Earth, all their technology, all their experience in harsh environments, it would all be tested in the next few weeks. "We're coming," he whispered to the image of the threatened planet. "And we're bringing Earth's greatest lesson with us. There's always a way to survive, if you're tough enough to find it." The Endurance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Lumini system. The crew's first view of their destination made them fall silent. The asteroid cluster filled half the main screen, a deadly swarm of rocks tumbling through space. Behind it, the Lumini homeworld glowed with an eerie orange light through its thick atmosphere. "Those rocks are bigger than our scans showed," John said, standing beside Captain Miller on the bridge. The ship's sensors were painting a grim picture. The largest asteroids were nearly 2 kilometers wide, their surfaces glittering with strange metallic crystals. Miller pressed a button on his chair. "All hands to stations. Begin initial scans." The next hour was tense as the Endurance's computers analyzed the situation. Mary's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, you need to see this. The magnetic field. It's not natural." The main screen changed to show a complex web of magnetic force lines surrounding the planet. They twisted and turned in impossible patterns, creating zones where normal ships couldn't safely fly. The Lumini said they tried to build defense satellites. Miller remembered. But they all failed. Now we know why. He turned to his crew. "The magnetic field will tear apart anything electronic that stays in it too long. That's why we can't use automated solutions." A new light flashed on the command console, an incoming transmission. The screen split to show High Elder Ray of the Lumini. The alien's wing membranes pulsed with worried colors. "Thank you for coming," Ray said. "But seeing the cluster up close, perhaps we were wrong to ask this of you. The risk is too great." Miller stepped forward. "With respect, Elder, that's our decision to make. We've already got a plan. Request permission to enter orbit." The Lumini leader's wings flickered with surprise, then steadied. "Granted. May your gods protect you." The Endurance's engines fired up, pushing the ship through the outer layers of the magnetic field. Warning alarms blared as the ship's electronic systems felt the strain. But this was what they had trained for. The crew switched to partially mechanical backup systems, technology that seemed primitive to most galactic species, but was perfect for this environment. "Beginning descent," called out Pete, the pilot. His hands moved steadily over the controls as the ship pierced the upper atmosphere. The hull temperature rose rapidly, but the ship's Earth-designed heat shields held. They broke through the cloud layer into a world of orange and red. The surface below was a mix of rocky plains and vast forests of crystalline trees that somehow survived in the toxic air. In the distance, they could see the dome-covered cities of the Lumini. Gravity increasing, the computer announced. Now at 1.2 Earth standard, 1.25, 1.3. The crew felt the extra weight settle onto their shoulders. Even with the special pills they'd taken, movement became harder. This was just a taste of what they'd face on the surface. "Launch bay, prepare the first probe," Miller ordered. They needed to test their equipment in these conditions before risking human lives. The probe launched smoothly, its sensors transmitting data as it approached one of the smaller asteroids. For 3 minutes, everything worked perfectly. Then the magnetic field twisted unexpectedly. The probe's signals became garbled, and its navigation system failed. They watched helplessly as it spun out of control and vaporized in the atmosphere. "Well," Miller said after a moment of silence, "that's why we're here instead of machines. Status report on the Mark VI suits." Mary's voice came back, tense but determined. "Ready, Captain. We've adjusted them based on the new readings. They won't be comfortable, but they'll keep us alive." Miller looked at the main screen, where the asteroid cluster loomed larger with each passing minute. The Lumini had built their civilization in this hellish environment, proving it was possible to thrive here. Now it was humanity's turn to prove they could work in it. "Begin surface team selection," he ordered. "We need our best people out there. And check the backup systems on the shuttles. We can't afford any failures once we're in the field." As his crew rushed to obey, Miller watched another probe launch, this one using more primitive but reliable guidance systems. They would find a way through this. Humans had spent their entire history adapting to impossible situations. This was just one more challenge to overcome. And they had to overcome it. A peaceful species' survival depended on them. The landing zone was nothing but flat rock and crystalline vegetation, chosen for its stability in the crushing gravity. Captain Miller led the first team down in their Mark VI suits, each step requiring careful attention. Even with the power assists and gravity pills, moving felt like walking underwater while carrying heavy weights. "Check your seals again," Miller ordered through the radio. "One leak and the air here will burn your lungs out." He watched as his 5 team members ran their suit diagnostics. Mary the engineer, Pete the pilot, Tom the medic, and 2 of their best demolitions experts, Bob and Jack. A group of Lumini watched from inside a protective dome they had set up nearby. Their wing membranes flickered with different colors as they observed the humans moving in conditions that would crush most alien species. "Base camp location confirmed," Mary reported, setting up the first piece of equipment. "Starting atmospheric shield deployment." She pressed a button, and a shimmer spread outward as the shield formed a bubble of breathable air around their landing zone. The next 4 hours were brutal work. They unloaded heavy equipment from the shuttle, set up living quarters, and assembled their modified mining tools. Every movement was a battle against the planet's pull. Even inside the atmospheric shield, they kept their suits on. No one wanted to risk exposure if the shield failed. First asteroid approach in 30 minutes. John's voice came from the Endurance in orbit. "You've got a clear path to target 1. Miller gathered his team around the holographic display in their base camp. The image showed their first target, an asteroid about half a kilometer wide. "Remember the plan. We go up in pairs. Bob and Jack place the charges while Mary monitors the asteroid's composition. Pete keeps the shuttle steady, and Tom stays ready for medical emergencies." The Lumini representatives moved closer to watch as the humans prepared their shuttle for launch. One of them, a scientist named Ray, spoke through a translator. "Your people move with such purpose, even in these conditions. We had thought no species could function effectively in our gravity." Miller smiled inside his helmet. "On Earth, we have a saying, pressure makes diamonds. The harder things get, the stronger we become." The shuttle launch was perfect, its modified engines fighting against the magnetic field and gravity. As they rose through the orange sky, Miller watched his team closely. Everyone was focused, professional, but he could see the strain in their movements. Their first close view of the asteroid was worse than expected. Its surface was covered in sharp crystalline formations that could tear their suits. Magnetic distortions made their instruments flicker and jump. "We'll have to do this old school," Bob said, pulling out manual survey tools. Like mining coal back on Earth. They worked methodically, placing charges at key points while Mary took readings with backup mechanical devices. The magnetic field kept trying to push them off the surface, making every movement a careful balance. Halfway through the operation, one of the crystalline formations suddenly shattered, spraying razor-sharp shards. "Tom's hit," Jack shouted. The medic's suit had a long gash across the arm section. Miller reacted instantly. Emergency seal. The suit's backup systems activated, spraying a quick hardening foam into the tear. Tom's vital signs spiked but then stabilized. "I'm okay," Tom reported, his voice tense but steady. "The foam's holding. Let's finish this." They completed the charge placement with no more incidents, but the close call had shaken everyone. Back at base camp, as they treated Tom's arm, Miller gathered the team. "This is just the first asteroid," he said. "There are 52 more to go. It's going to get harder. The magnetic field is getting stronger as the cluster gets closer. If anyone wants to pull out, now's the time." The team looked at each other. Then Mary spoke up. "Captain, we knew this was going to be hell when we signed up. But that's the thing about humans. We're pretty good at walking through hell when we need to." Bob nodded. "Besides, we got something these asteroids don't have: training, teamwork, and pure human stubbornness." The Lumini watched this exchange, their wing membranes glowing with amazement. They were beginning to understand why humans had survived and thrived on their dangerous homeworld. It wasn't just physical adaptations, it was their unbreakable spirit and determination to overcome any challenge. 20 days into the mission, exhaustion showed on every face at base camp. The team had successfully placed charges on 38 asteroids, but each operation was harder than the last. The magnetic field had grown stronger as the cluster drew closer, and the planet's gravity seemed to pull at their bones even during rest periods. Captain Miller studied the latest sensor readings with Mary and Bob. Their next target was different: a massive asteroid with an unusual metallic core. "The readings are strange," Mary said, pointing to the data. "The core's composition is unlike anything we've seen. It's affecting the magnetic field around it." Miller nodded. "We need more data. Prep the shuttle for a close scan." An hour later, Miller watched as Pete piloted the shuttle toward the asteroid. Inside were Bob, Jack, and a new team member named Mike, who had replaced Tom while he recovered from his injury. The mission started normally. The shuttle approached the asteroid, fighting against magnetic distortions that made the controls sluggish. Then everything went wrong. "Captain," Pete's voice crackled through the radio, "we're losing power. The magnetic field, it's draining our systems." Miller jumped to his feet. "Emergency protocols. Switch to backup power." Backups failing. The shuttle's engines sputtered and died. The small craft began drifting toward the asteroid's surface. "Brace for impact." Pete's last warning was followed by static. The base camp erupted into action. Miller barked orders as he ran toward the second shuttle. "Mary, get me everything you have on that asteroid's field. John, can you get a lock on them from the Endurance?" "Negative." John's voice came from orbit. "The magnetic interference is too strong. We can barely maintain communication." The Lumini gathered around their observation dome, their wing membranes flashing dark colors of distress. High Elder Ray spoke through the translator. "Captain, the asteroid's core. Our scientists say it's beginning to react with the magnetic field. If it breaks apart." Mary's face went pale as she checked the readings. "He's right. If that core destabilizes, it could set off a chain reaction through the entire cluster. Instead of a few big impacts, we'd have thousands of smaller ones hitting all over the planet." Miller faced his worst moment as a commander. Safety protocols said they should wait, analyze the situation, find a safe solution. But there wasn't time. His people were trapped on that asteroid, and every minute increased the risk of a catastrophic chain reaction. "I'm going up," he announced. "Mary, you're with me. We'll take the backup shuttle." "Captain," John's voice cut in from the Endurance, "that's against every safety regulation we have." In these conditions, we're the only ones who can save them," Miller interrupted. "Humans don't leave their people behind. Ever." The second shuttle launched minutes later. Miller and Mary wore the heaviest suits they had, modified with extra radiation shielding. The flight up was like riding through a storm. Magnetic waves buffeted the shuttle, and their instruments kept failing. They found the first shuttle crashed on a relatively flat part of the asteroid. Its hull was cracked, but the emergency containment systems had activated. Through the viewport, they could see their teammates moving slowly inside, conserving their suit oxygen. "Their communications are dead," Mary reported. "And we can't dock. The magnetic field is too strong here." Miller looked at the distance between the shuttles. About 50 meters of asteroid surface, covered in sharp crystals and warped by magnetic forces that could tear their suits apart. "We'll have to go outside," he said. "Run a line between the shuttles. Bring them across one at a time." Mary's eyes widened. In this field, the suits weren't designed for this kind of exposure. "The suits weren't designed for any of this," Miller replied, checking his helmet seals. "But humans were designed to do the impossible when we have to." He hit the airlock control. The outer door opened to reveal the stark surface of the asteroid, lit by the orange glow of the Lumini world below. The magnetic field made their suit sensors scream in protest. Miller took the first step out. Static filled his radio, but he could still hear Mary's voice. "The core's becoming more unstable. We got maybe 20 minutes before. Then we'll do it in 15, Miller said. He started laying the guideline, fighting against forces that threatened to tear him apart. Because that's what humans do. We take the impossible, and we make it happen. The magnetic field tore at Miller's suit as he secured the guideline between the shuttles. Each step felt like walking through thick mud while being pulled in 10 different directions. Behind him, Mary monitored the asteroid's core through a backup mechanical sensor. "Core temperature rising," she shouted over the radio static. 15 minutes until critical. Miller reached the crashed shuttle and looked through its viewport. Inside, he could see Bob, Jack, Pete, and Mike conserving their oxygen, their faces tense but determined. He banged on the hull to get their attention, then pointed to the guideline. "Switching to manual suit controls," Miller reported. The magnetic field was playing havoc with their powered systems, but the suits could still work on basic mechanical backup. It was like going back 100 years in technology, but that was exactly what they needed. Pete was first. He crawled along the guideline, fighting the same forces that threatened to tear them apart. Miller and Mary helped him into their shuttle. One by one, they'd brought the others across. Each trip took precious minutes off their countdown. But as they helped Mike, the last crew member, across the gap, Mary's sensor began beeping rapidly. "The core, it's destabilizing faster than we thought." Miller looked at the asteroid's surface. Cracks were appearing, glowing with strange energy as the magnetic forces twisted through the metallic core. They had maybe 5 minutes, not 15. "Everyone in the shuttle," he ordered. But as they strapped in, Pete checked the engine readings and shook his head. "Power's too low," the pilot reported. "The magnetic field drained too much. We'll never break free of the asteroid's pull." The crew looked at each other. They had come so far, survived so much, only to be trapped here when the asteroid exploded. Then Mary's eyes lit up. "The magnetic field," she said quickly. "It's not just a problem. It's the solution. Pete, shut down all electronic shielding." "That'll fry our systems," Pete protested. "Exactly." Mary was already pulling open a panel. "The field's strongest around the core. When it blows, it'll create a massive magnetic pulse, if we time it right." Miller understood. "We can ride the wave out, like surfing at tsunami." They worked frantically, stripping away the shuttle's electronic protection. Mary rigged a manual control system using parts from their suits. It was crazy, dangerous, and exactly the kind of thinking that had kept humanity alive on Earth. "Core breach in 1 minute," Bob called out, watching the sensor. Pete gripped the manual controls. They had one chance. If their timing was wrong, they'd be torn apart. The asteroid's surface was breaking apart now. Energy coursed through the cracks like glowing rivers. 30 seconds. 20. 10. "Now," Mary shouted. Pete fired their remaining power into the engines just as the core exploded. The magnetic pulse hit them like a physical wall. The shuttle's hull creaked in protest as the wave picked them up and hurled them away from the asteroid. Warning lights flashed across every working system they had left. The temperature inside the cabin soared. Metal groaned. The crew held on as their small craft tumbled through space. Then suddenly, it was over. They were floating safely, the asteroid breaking apart behind them. Through the viewport, they could see the Endurance moving to pick them up. Did we just surf a magnetic explosion?" Mike asked in disbelief. That's not even the craziest part, Mary said, checking her readings. The explosion's energy pattern. It's creating a cascade effect through the magnetic field. The entire asteroid cluster is being pushed off course. John's voice crackled over the radio from the Endurance. Whatever you did out there, it worked. The cluster's breaking up. The smaller pieces will burn up in the atmosphere, and the new trajectory takes the bigger ones clear of the planet. The crew looked at each other, their faces showing the exhaustion and relief. They had come to save the Lumini world through careful planning and advanced technology. Instead, they had succeeded by falling back on humanity's greatest strengths: adaptability, quick thinking, and the ability to turn nature's own forces to their advantage. You know what this means, Bob said with a tired grin. We just saved an entire civilization by breaking all the safety rules and doing something completely insane. Miller laughed. Well, that's another human specialty. Sometimes the craziest solution is the right one. As the Endurance's rescue shuttle approached, Miller looked down at the Lumini world below. Its orange clouds seemed a bit less threatening now. They had proven that humans could not only survive here, but could overcome its worst challenges. Just another day at the office for a bunch of Deathworlders, he said proudly. 1 month after the asteroid crisis, the Galactic Council chamber was packed. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to witness something unprecedented, a formal ceremony honoring a Deathworlder crew. Captain Miller and his team stood before the council, their dress uniforms pressed and medals gleaming. They looked strange among the floating, hovering, and gliding alien representatives, but they stood tall despite the lingering exhaustion in their bones. First Speaker Tom addressed the chamber. We are here today to recognize not just bravery, but a complete change in how we view our galactic community. The humans have shown us that what we once saw as disadvantages can become the greatest strengths. High Elder Ray of the Lumini floated forward, his wing membranes glowing with bright, happy colors. Our world faced extinction. No other species could help us. But these humans, these remarkable Deathworlders, did more than save us. They taught us a valuable lesson. The Elder's wings shifted to display moving patterns as he continued. They showed us that true strength comes not from evolving in comfortable conditions, but from facing challenges and adapting to them. Their harsh world gave them gifts we never understood before. Mary stepped forward when asked to explain how they had turned the magnetic disaster into salvation. She kept her explanation simple, but the council members listened with new respect. What had seemed like primitive backup systems and dangerous improvisations were now recognized as brilliant adaptations. On Earth, she explained, we learned long ago that you can't always overpower nature. Sometimes you have to work with it, turn its force to your advantage. That's not primitive thinking, it's survival thinking. The council had prepared a special award, a crystal statue showing the Endurance riding the magnetic wave that had saved both the ship and the Lumini world. As Miller accepted it, he saw something had changed in how the alien representatives looked at him and his crew. Second Speaker Bill, who had once doubted humans could help, made the formal announcement. The Council hereby removes the cautionary designation of Deathworlder from humanity's status. From now on, they will be known as adaptive specialists in recognition of their unique capabilities. But the ceremony's biggest surprise came from the Lumini themselves. High Elder Ray announced that they were establishing a joint training program with Earth. Our young ones will learn from humans how to better survive on our own world. In return, we offer our knowledge of magnetic field technology, which humans have shown such natural skill in adapting. After the ceremony, Miller found himself in one of the council's observation rooms with his crew. Through the huge windows, they could see both Earth and the Lumini world, 2 dots of light in the vast darkness. Hard to believe a month ago, they thought we were too primitive to be proper members of the galactic community, Bob said, nursing a drink. Mary smiled. Amazing what you can accomplish with some duct tape, mechanical backups, and pure human stubbornness. That's what they didn't understand, Miller added, looking at his crew with pride. Every primitive backup system, every crude mechanical solution, they were all products of thousands of years of human innovation. We learned to survive on Earth by being clever, not just strong. The door opened, and Observer Alice, the human representative who had first volunteered Earth's help, joined them. The Council's already received 12 new requests for human assistance on various worlds. Seems Deathworlder is becoming a mark of pride. Looking out at the stars, Miller thought about everything they had achieved. The injuries were healing, the exhaustion would fade, but the legacy of their mission would live on. Humanity had proven itself not just capable of surviving in the galaxy, but essential to its future. You know what the best part is? Pete asked, grinning. We didn't have to change who we are or how we do things. We just had to show them why we do things our way. The crew raised their glasses in a toast. To Earth, to survival, and to a future where being a Deathworlder meant being ready to help others survive, no matter the challenge. Among the stars, 2 worlds shone like beacons, Earth and the Lumini homeworld. Different, dangerous in their own ways, but now forever linked by the courage of those who refuse to accept impossible odds.